So I am going to
Leave it in.
apologize. I'm going to apologize up front. There's some thing that's running that is, and I imagine it's the AC unit somewhere upstairs that is going. That it's just this consistent noise. So that is what it is. Welcome everybody to TIWAKS episode 4, or
Wish I had an
episode
AC unit upstairs.
episode 2, kind of depending on what if you've so have you ever want the to but I'm one of your hosts, Nathan, who definitely graduated with I like a 3.7 or something like that. I proved that I am smart, and this is my
I'm
co-host.
sorry. I just realized that my speakers were still on and they were buzzing. I don't know if that was getting picked up at all, but it was bothering me. I am Brennan. I also graduated with a decent GPA and apparently still can't speak properly. But we're gonna ignore that because that's not really important to running a podcast. Speaking.
I'll fix it in post as I
I'll
need the
fix
line.
it in post. I'll fix
Oh
our live
man.
podcast in post. Um,
Okay, boy, howdy. So, we both have had some life stuff happen. How about you go first? Because I understand you recently had an adventure out to Montana. You want to talk about that?
yeah, I did. My cousin, my mom's sister's daughter, got married, which was really cool. We have known Will, her now husband, for a couple of years now. I blank on how many years it's actually been, but it was really cool ceremony. There was concerns about social distancing and about COVID fears, especially for me since I'm high risk, and for my sister who, even though she isn't high risk, her entire job is working with a deaf disabled woman who is completely immune compromised, and so she, as it is, when we got back, she's gonna have to wait 8 days before she can get a test to even be eligible to go back to work. So that sucks for her. But the ceremony was good, and we were glad to be able to be there for that. What about you?
Uh, it's just had another closing go through. And I am replacing my old Mac from 2010. Which was a weirdly emotional experience. It
Hmm.
should be showing up on Wednesday, and I'm really excited for that. But I have it sitting here. It's plugged in. I had so the Wi-Fi card for either is either out of date, busted, or disconnected from the hard drive or from the motherboard or
I
something
don't
like
know.
that. So it doesn't have Wi-Fi, but I can still hook it up to Ethernet. So I have a cable for that and hooked it up and pulled all of my old writing files, all of my old notes, and I'll double check to make sure I have all of my music theory notes because I actually want to hang on to those, and all of my project on Logic Pro, and uploaded into Google Drive. Fun fact: without any of the actual instrument data, and it's just like the MIDI files. Those are really small files that Logic saves. Now, granted, it'll use up a whole bunch of your processing power when you actually go to play it, because it's pulling all the data from Logic itself,
Sure.
all your plugins and stuff like that. But a single Logic, at least the way I was doing stuff, because I was a couple tracks here and there, maybe 8 tracks at the most. Like, I wasn't doing anything huge with it. But I I mean, there maybe, I don't know, 1.2 megabyte files or something like that. Maybe
Huh.
closer to 20 or 30. But when I went to upload it all to my Google Drive, I was like, oh my god, am I gonna have to like cheat and create a new Google Drive account just for this or something like that? No, it only took up like an additional gigabyte of data at most.
Huh.
I was really
Well,
surprised, and I had a lot of projects that I had on there that I just like started and never did anything with them. But it was weird kind of going through, and I've been going through and reading some of the old stuff I used to write, because I used to do a lot of creative writing when
I
I
didn't know.
was at Azusa the first 3 years. I spent a lot. Well, I mean, all 4 years that I was 3.5 that I was there. I spent a lot of time doing creative writing. Just it was an outlet, um, and some of it is okay. A lot of it is bad.
Hey man,
Um,
you know, that's I always really like the saying wherever it came from. The only way to make good art is to make bad art. Or rather, you can even say the only way to make good art is to make mediocre art. The only way to make mediocre art is to make bad art.
well, at this rate, I should be making some pretty mediocre art because holy crap, is some of that stuff. I don't know how to write characters. My plots don't make any sense. The dialogue is okay at best.
That's how you
Sometimes
learn.
I I would say, oh man, reading. I don't know how to write a strong woman, but reading back on it, I don't know how to write a strong man either. So
I feel like characterization is one of those things that's I hesitate to say it seems simple, but when you are viewing, and I think this is true with a lot of good art, when you're looking at a finished product, it seems obvious. The choices seem clear. You're like, of course, that makes sense.
oh yeah,
But then
yeah,
if you go into trying to like put something like that together, you start to realize that this is incredibly complicated
yeah.
on the
To like
subject of
it's easy enough to like, okay, here are the things that drive the characters that I've written, but then to actually make them make sense in any regard was just apparently I thought all the motivations were good, but as I kind of dig into it, I'm like, this is ugh,
yeah,
bad.
it's tough. And so much of I feel like so much of our personal experiences when it comes to writing character are drawn from media itself.
Oh yeah.
And hot take, a lot of media does not portray realistic people. So I think we tend to have kind of skewed views on what motivates human beings in extreme circumstances. Like I think I heard something once, I don't even remember where I heard it, but they said something someone was saying to the effect of like, well, infidelity is like hiding infidelity is usually not a cause for homicide. And I'm like not generally a motive that we see apparently. Don't quote me on this. I'm not a legal scholar, but I heard that thrown around and I was like that is the kind of thing that I feel like is a trope that you would see in a lot of stories where people would do all these extreme measures to hide something like infidelity. And it's kind of one of those things where we might not question it until we kind of look at the real world and say, you know, I probably wouldn't kill someone to hide that. That's kind of extreme, you know? Like the consequences of having infidelity discovered would be way less than like the difficulty and stress with committing and hiding a murder. But that's not the kind of thing we think about when we're writing character. We don't think about how would a real person react to this.
Yeah. 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 I mean, like, I'm sure that it was much more common in the 17th century where the investigative process was much less refined and it was actually expected for a nobleman to murder his mistress. Like, you knew what you were getting into when you're
Yeah.
the mistress in that regard. You're thinking, well,
Ugh.
I'm going to get a couple really good meals out of this and I'll get to wear some nice clothes for a while and I'm going to die. And I wish things were
But
better, but this is
you
what
wouldn't
we
get
get for living
killed.
in this shitty male dominated society, so here we are.
I mean, I agree with that. I do think you wouldn't get killed for like in an effort to hide the affair because everyone would already know about it.
Yeah.
You would inevitably get killed after being accused of sleeping with someone else,
Yeah.
whether or not it was true.
Yeah. Probably. I mean,
But I always think as a sidebar here, I always think it's absolutely hilarious in a horrible way, like the level of vitriol summoned by these men against against just women accused like their wives being accused of infidelity when they're just like have like 20 mistresses or concubines or just like casual affairs. It's like, dude, you really need to take a long, hard look at this situation.
it's the old phrase, don't throw stones when you live in a glass house. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
there's an actual way to phrase that, and I know I butchered it. But, so yeah. So I labeled the actual title of this podcast is episode 4. Nathan talks way too much about Ghost of Tsushima. Um,
Oh boy.
So
Can't
strap in,
wait.
kids. This is gonna get real. So actually, before I go into that, I have I kind of a lead in and topic for that. So don't worry, kids. We're gonna talk about probably one of the most beautiful games I played on the PlayStation 4. Um, I had a philosophy class. It was like an intro to philosophy class when I was in college. You say no? Okay, no, I remember now. It was a religion class. Strangely enough, early Christian history, I believe, is what it was, or early religious practices of Christianity, something like that. It was a
Was it a
really,
PLU or
yeah, it was a PLU. It was a really
was it
fascinating
early
class.
Christianity?
Hmm.
I heard a lot of
Yeah,
people
yeah,
talking
yeah,
about
yeah,
early
yeah.
Christianity. Yeah.
I don't remember the professor's name. She was this really awesome redheaded woman who she took no crap from anybody, and I really liked that. Um, but we talked about in the class we talked about this concept of honor and shame. And honor and shame is kind of being one of the major driving forces between cultural and societal norms, where we do or don't do certain things because they are either honorable or dishonorable by the standards of the society we've set forth. Um,
Mm.
you have, I think, there's conflicts that can arise in between societal groups where those very core concepts of honor and shame are treated differently, or you have different ideologies and different acts and things like that that are considered honorable in one culture and they're dishonorable in another. Um, I mean, something really simple in a lot of Asian cultures, it is considered maybe not in terms of like, oh, it's honorable to do this and dishonorable to do this, but it is considered polite, and I think that might be maybe a more colloquial term to work with. Were polite and impolite. It is polite to take your shoes off before entering somebody's residence. That's why you see a lot of Japanese media where people will be wandering around their houses not wearing shoes. That's not so much a thing here in a lot of Western countries, the U.S. in particular, where you can just wear your shoes wherever, nobody cares.
That was always, just as a brief side note, my dad grew up from. I mean, I think that he literally moved there when he was like a couple months old at the oldest. My dad grew up in Southeast Asia in the Philippines, out in like the jungle with the Subanan people because his parents were missionaries, and so there are a lot of those cultural practices have been in our household a lot, including that one, including we never really wear shoes in the house. So I remember hearing about that in later life and being like, wait, people wear their shoes in the house? That's so weird. They're dirty.
Yeah, and I don't to this day I don't know why that's a practice in our home, because my dad was born in Korea, but he never grew up. Like, he grew up here. He was adopted and shipped over here to the United States. So there's no there's no cultural upbringing that would say whether or not we would wear shoes in the house. We just I don't know. I'm home. I'm not gonna wear shoes are for when you go other places that aren't home. Like that's how I've always
Yeah.
viewed it. Um, but I'll read a Reddit thread every now and again where you have a couple that's getting married, and you have the in-laws who will purposefully wear their shoes inside the son-in-law or daughter-in-law to be or whoever their home, because they're being defined, or they're like, you can't tell me what to do, and it's this mindset of it's their house, you do what they ask.
That's just,
um
God, you know, I wish that this wasn't so topically relevant. This notion of people doing obstinate, pointless things just for the point of doing obstinate, pointless things.
because apparently doing this is just
God.
really hard.
I'm I'm not going to let this tangent take up too much time because I do want to let you get to your point. But the when we were in Montana and in Idaho as well, actually, when we pulled in, because we spent 2 days traveling there because we didn't want to fly, because we didn't want to be locked in a plague coffin with a bunch of other people. We stayed in a hotel the first night, and we walked like the first hotel we walked into in Idaho. They told us, "Oh, you don't have to wear those if you don't want to," meaning masks.
You told me
And then I
about
like
that.
and I ordered a DoorDash order to the room, and the dasher wasn't wearing a mask. And when I went out to the front desk to like, hey, can you guys just confirm this address is correct for this hotel? The lady who was not wearing a mask just like walked right up to me, like this close to me, and was like looking. I'm like, don't do this, please. And like, I noticed this attitude just in general. The very few times we were in public, it was just people just don't care, just not doing it. So much. Okay, I think we may have even talked about this on stream before, but I feel like it bears mentioning once again. Okay, I'm gonna. This is a brief tutorial. What is this?
That is a mouth cover.
And why is this? I don't get it. I don't get it.
For the audio listeners, Brennan just took a cloth mask and left his nose exposed.
Stop doing this. Please.
The mask goes over
Or
your
this
nose.
Or the neckerchief.
Yeah,
the stylish
it's not a
neckerchief.
chin guard. It's not a lip guard. It's not a forehead cover. It is a face mask.
I
Cover
haven't
the
seen the forehead
nose.
cover one.
Cover your chin. There you go. Like, it's infuriating. So,
Anyway, but please continue.
to maybe more belabor this point of this honor and shame, when we talked in this class, it's one of the biggest kind of differences that we see in early Christian faith and onward, even now to a certain extent, although society mostly mocks people for doing this, the idea of martyrdom. Mid to late Roman society, I guess, and early Christianity was often at odds in this regard, where the idea of dying for your deity, dying for your God and your belief in early Christian belief, that was a big thing. Like, you did that. It helped like show your faith. Where in Roman society, and I think this, I'm not entirely sure on this, but I believe this is fairly typical when you have a monotheistic society versus a polytheistic society or a religion. There was no sense in dying for the god of war, because if he's not doing it for you, just move on. Just pick a different one for a while. He'll get over it.
You could also make the argument if you die. I would just say if you make the argument, if you die while worshiping the god of war, maybe he's not doing, maybe he's not fulfilling his end of the bargain. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah. So, and you see this a lot with the early Christian martyrs, where their deaths were considered shameful by Roman society standards, but they're still upheld, in modern society, because guess which set of religion kind of won out after a while. So here we go. You have this idea that what was considered honorable for one group of people was considered extremely shameful for the other. Enter Ghost of Tsushima. We're gonna tie. I'll circle back. Ghost of Tsushima is a PlayStation 4 exclusive. It's sort of PlayStation's swan song. It's one of the last big exclusive titles they'll have before the next console generation. Made and developed by Sucker Punch Studios, who before this made the Sly Cooper games, which were stealth action games featuring a anthropomorphic raccoon, really a furry's dream, in a stealth action game for the PlayStation 2. And I think they had a PS3 release at some point. And the Infamous games. I only vaguely know what those games are. They're open world action RPGs. Kind of when, I don't know if you ever played, I'll just start throwing out game names and you'll probably have heard of one of them or played one of them. The Prototype games. Have you ever heard or played any of those?
I've heard of them. I haven't played
Perfect, got it first try.
them.
It's basically that, but I think you have like electro powers or something. A little more superhero than anti-hero, I think. But it was in they were developing those games at the same time where a lot of those open world action, oh, it's Assassin's Creed, but again we got weird superpowers, or oh, it's Assassin's Creed but Spider-Man, like oh, it's Assassin's Creed but it's actually Superman 64. Um, so I'm sort of glad I wasn't paying attention to who the developer was at the time, because I might have been a little apprehensive. Not, I don't remember the infamous. One, I don't really remember the infamous games. I never really played them. I don't remember them being critically panned or lauded in any regard. They were just decent 7/8 out of 10 fun experiences. They had their flaws, whatever. Ghost of Tsushima takes place around 1276, I believe, during the very real Mongol invasion of the island of Tsushima, one of the western islands of the Japanese archipelago. I always want to call it an archipelago, knowing full well that I'm wrong. And you've been doing a little bit of research on Chinese history and Mongolian involvement in
Yeah.
that regard. For those of you who don't know, the Mongol Empire to this day had the largest landmass control of any vaguely political government system. Now, granted, they didn't last that long in the grand scheme of things, but when everybody talks about the Roman Empire, the British Empire, Alexander the Great, they got nothing when it comes to the empire that Chinggis Khan, or for the more Americanized Genghis Khan, what he helped build. Now, I mean, based on Japanese history and how Mongolian history sort of goes, I'm assuming eventually we as the player are gonna win, or at least the Mongols will eventually leave because Japan still exists and Mongolia is not the giant titan that it was back in the 13th century. So you play as Jin Sakai of the Sakai clan, the eldest and I think only son and head of the Sakai clan. The game begins right as the Mongols land their troops, and I believe Kotukan is the guy leading the invasion. You're with your uncle, Lord Shimura. Another samurai goes to ride down to challenge these guys in single combat, and I'm sure there's enough promotional. I mean, you'll see this at some point if you watch enough of the gameplay, where the guy goes down and he goes, "I have come here. Send your greatest warrior and challenge me in single combat." So, what the Khan does, he's got this goblet of alcohol. He splashes the entire goblet on the guy, grabs a torch from a sconce, and hits him with it, and lights him on fire.
Of course.
And the reaction is the savages. You ride into battle. Things don't go well. You, as they say, get your ass kicked. And a lot happens. Eventually, so here's an instance of one society, what might have been considered honorable versus shameful. There, for that point in time, there was no why would I fight you when I can just kill you? Like, there's no purpose. Jin eventually, like, he survives the battle, is nursed back to health by the thief Yuna, who the two of them kind of start rebuilding kind of a resistance movement in the southern part of the island of Tsushima. You work to rescue your uncle, and that's the whole thing. But Jin starts to learn, like, what do I have to do to beat the Mongols? How do I kick them off this island? And he learns that if I am going to win this war, I am going to have to resort to tactics that most would be considered dishonorable by samurai standards, like killing somebody from the shadows and stabbing somebody in the back and shooting them with a poison blow dart and throwing a sticky bomb at them, and like all these different things where his own code of honor is challenged regularly by the problems that are presented to him, and you as the player can internalize that to a certain extent where you can say, you know what, I'm going to try and do this am I going to do this as the samurai, or am I going to do this as the ghost? On a surface level, I mean, the game is absolutely gorgeous. I should say, at its core, it very much. I think I talked about this when we were messaging yesterday. I can feel the DNA of, I want to say, like 3 other games strewn throughout this experience, maybe 4. I can feel the pieces of Breath of the Wild. I can feel Assassin's Creed. I think I feel that the most. There's a little bit of Shadow of Mordor, and just the littlest inkling of Far Cry, probably Far Cry 3, maybe Far Cry 4. In terms of Breath of the Wild, the DNA that I can feel is this big, beautiful, sweeping open world. They took the artistry, they're like, we're going to make it both gritty and gorgeous at the same time. And I think that is... I don't like saying that the graphics of a game are the selling point, because that feels so like... We're in 2020. Like, who cares? Like, you're going to make a game look pretty, or you're going to make it look artistic. Who cares? But there is something about... And there's something that they're doing some crazy witchcraft to make this happen on the PlayStation, but it's the animation in the tall grass and the leaves and stuff like that as the wind sweeps through. It is all believable. How the wind interacts and how you interact with the grass and the trees and everything like that. So it creates this intense sensation of realism that you don't get in other games because it just doesn't exist. The way that you get some of the god rays and the bloom effect with the light is, it's not J.J. Abrams bloom, so it is believable to a certain extent. And just the usage of both the combination of some of the muted colors you get from the stone and the earth, to the wood and stuff like that, to a lot of the really bright, beautiful colors, the yellow leaves around the golden temple, and the red leaves and all this kind of stuff, the greenery, and it creates this really... I've had a couple of moments where I've had my breath taken away by just how good this game looks. The character models are incredible. One of the things I really love is the pauldrons, the shoulder pieces that they have for the samurai armor. Those are attached very differently than you would see in European plate mail. So to see them kind of bounce and move and interact the way they really would, where they have some weight to them, they don't really... I think I had one moment where they like clipped through a helmet, but that was it. Like, that in and of itself, everything that would hang freely and collide with something has... The fact that your cape collides with the scabbard, the sheath of your katana, is baffling to me. Oh, it's so cool. And
it's so hard to do as well.
Yeah. Graphically, it's the game's biggest strength, which says nothing of the story is fantastic. It's fairly simply written, but I like that. They're not trying to lean too heavily on a whole bunch of nuance or making things super complex. There's fairly predictable story beats that happen, and it helps, I think. So there's, graphics, 10 out of 10. Probably one of the prettiest games I've ever seen in all of the gaming I've done. And I have a monstrous PC here that can produce some pretty mind-boggling effects. I think the audio design is really good. I think there's the other part of the Breath of the Wild that I feel where it's a very minimalistic soundtrack. And I think for a game like this, you need that. There's not a driving overworld theme. There's very little combat music. You get these little motifs here and there. I think my favorite right now is when you go and you find a place to sit down and write haiku. uh, It'll play this little motif that kind of breaks into an actual song for the most part, but it's so ambient and ethereal. It's so perfect to that. And then you have the gameplay, which is mostly just Assassin's Creed with a little bit of Dark Souls combined in. There are no. It is a very minimalistic HUD. It only ever displays things when you absolutely need them in any given moment. So like when you're just riding around on your horse, just traveling around, there is no heads up display. There's nothing. It is just you, the horse, and the world. When you're in combat, it'll show your health bar and your charges of resolve and everything else and that, because you need that information while you're fighting.
Sure.
But it doesn't like, there are no alert cues for when somebody is attacking you. It'll show you a little glint here for the unblockable attacks, which through enough upgrades become, you can't block them but you can parry them attacks, which is a thing in itself. It is a system that, it's very simple, where, and this is where like Souls and Sekiro sort of comes in, where all your enemies have a certain amount of posture or something that you can break, and ultimately you're just trying to kill them. You're trying to reduce their health to 0, and that'll display to a certain extent as well. But you are pressed to both be, you can play defensively, but often fights will present themselves as such that if you try to play defensively, you're not going to make any headway. You have to create an opening in a lot of fights. So a lot of times you'll move in and make your attack against somebody just enough to break their stance, and that'll be enough time. They'll be staggered for long enough. You can block another attack and push somebody away, and then finish the guy you're working on to begin with, and then you turn your attention to the next guy. The camera does not lock onto targets, and normally I would be hypercritical of that, because I've played so many games that of course it has a lock-on system. But the game plays well enough. The game, it to add the lock-on system, I think, would almost take away from the experience.
See, for me, I feel like I have a very different experience in terms of, and perspective in terms of locking on systems, having played exclusively on PC pretty much. Obviously that means I don't get to play this game, which is a huge bummer. Hopefully I will see a PC port of that in the next couple of years, and I'll get to experience that. We may. I mean, I think that they did that with Horizon Zero Dawn, didn't they?
Comes out on the 8th of early August. So it's not unheard of, but it is rare.
Right. But I remember playing specifically Jedi Fallen Order. I literally never used the lock-on system because I think it's just a nature of the difference in keyboard and mouse versus controllers. You don't really need a lock-on system when your sensitivity can be so high that you can that you can move around so easily. And in fact, it tends to be a hindrance because in those third-person games, it's nice to be able to kind of shift your view around and get a view of the battlefield.
And you very much need that in Ghost.
Yeah.
I like that the world feels fairly grounded, and the two ways that I can feel that most is in the exploration, where Jin does not have, I mean, in terms of video games, Jin does not have a great vertical leap, but in terms of actual human ability, he has a pretty good vertical.
What, you mean he can't leap 6 feet?
Yeah, no, he doesn't have double jump. It's bullshit.
Where are the rocket boots?
Yeah, if you fall like what 4 bodies worth of length, you might just die. You will
really
fall.
unusual.
You will break both your ankles, and you are effectively dead. Like, that's more or less what happens. So,
that's realistic.
you can feel like there. It's presented there, and it's presented in the actual like combat where, all of his stances feel very good. There's very little opening that he leaves himself. There's a little bit of a windup for most of the attacks, as you would expect in this kind of combat, and the attacks got some weight to them. as well they should, because like we have this perception, and I don't know where this came from, where a katana is this light thing. No, like a katana is heavy as just as any other two-handed sword. Um, we just have this perception because there is this idea that you train yourself so perfectly this with this weapon. But part of the reason when you see like a master cut through like a couple things of bamboo, part of the reason that works is because that sword is sharp as shit. But the other reason is because it's got some weight to it. Has the
Yeah.
capacity to carry through. I really like that the combat animations. They're slick, they're flashy, but they're not over the top. Really,
Mm.
ever. Like when you go, there are really no decapitations, which is very hard to do with a sword to begin with. You're
Yeah.
not, splitting dudes in half. But I love the moment where it's such a simple one where he reaches out and it's just the simple hit here, and then the guy is effectively dead, and to get him off the sword, he just pushes him and then recoils back, and that's enough to get him off. Like that dude's dead.
Right.
There's no hope for him. Like your stab move while you're in stone stance will kill most people because it is very difficult to block a stab, especially
Yep.
if you're not ready for it. And guess what? Stabs super lethal. Uh,
I actually have a little bit of experience with this. Breaking a thrust is hard, and I'm not very good at it. Um, it's a hard thing to do because what you effectively have to do, at least in the style of swordsmanship that I've studied, is that you have to hit. You have to either move, like the best thing to do is to get out of the way, but then another thing you can do is kind of step to the side and beat the sword down, and then you have the position where your sword is above their sword, theirs is down, and then you can cut up. But I feel like it's just a hard thing to do when you don't know what's going to happen. It's a hard thing to do when you do know what's going to happen, and I feel like that's the thing that I think it's easy for people to forget about when they think about sword fighting. Is it's like, well, that's so easy. It's like, well, first of all, no, it isn't. Second of all, he has no idea what that guy's about to do.
the one of I thought I would get tired of this gimmick in the game, and so far, it has probably been one of my favorite features, and it harkens back to a lot of those old samurai films, where you'll be approaching a group of dudes, they see you, you see them, so you can challenge them to a standoff. Um, you have a moment, you hold down a button and wait for them to make their attack. So when they move to attack, but before they connect, you release the button and you get an instant kill.
Oh, it's so cool.
And it will do. I think the only people who won't do a standoff with you are the generals and leaders, and you have to fight them. Like there's no way around it. But really, all like from the shitty dudes who are wearing like a t-shirt and boxers and have like a sharp stick, all the way up to like the top tier like big ass like 6'2" brutes carrying the Mongolian hammer. If they are caught up in that standoff mode, you will kill them. And I don't know if this is a real thing in sword fighting, but what I've noticed, and what is always my giveaway, I'm not watching their upper body, I'm not watching what their weapon is doing, because like they'll try and fake you out. I watch their feet, because the second they
Yep.
make that step in, I'm like, you're dead, you're done. You can pick up an upgrade
And
to the standoff where you can add additional dudes to that, where like you kill the first guy and another guy will come running, you get him, another guy will come, you get him, and then you pick up the Sakai clan armor but halfway through the game, which gives you another standoff kill. So I've had a couple of encounters where I'll roll up and there's 4 dudes. I'm like, well, we're gonna put on our different shirt, we're gonna put on our ass kicking outfit. Shout out to Pro ZD, this is my ass kicking outfit, bitch. And waste them all. I get all my resolve back. I get a whole bunch of health. Like, we're good. And oh, look, I saved the peasant. Awesome.
it's interesting you should say that. One of the biggest things they try to drill into us in sword fighting, which I would guess is probably a fundamental that carries across styles, is the sword should move before anything else. The feet follow through. Because otherwise, exactly what you're saying happens. You step, they know what you're going to do, or they just cut your leg. and then you're really, really screwed.
But
I imagine that's evident in some of the animations.
yeah, yeah, it's so there's little things, especially in the combat, that make it feel really brutal and visceral. The idea that um, most of like they're dead, but most of the dudes that you waste, like it takes them a couple seconds to actually like stop moving.
Yeah,
And I know some of it is the artistry in the game. It's something they're doing for effect. Where I have like the heavenly strike where it's just one just swish, and like it's like the classic like go from here and then dash 3 feet and you're suddenly at the other side of them. Like it, there's a little bit of the fantastical just because it's fun, and like I'll go through them and they're dead and they're standing there and they're like, and they eventually
yeah.
drop. And there's a couple fights like that where you'll deal with them and they won't collapse immediately. A couple of them will just go down because that's how that rolls. Um, I found this is so cruel of me. I found in a couple fights it's actually better to have a couple of them try and like crawl away, and the reason is because once somebody is down like that, they're never gonna get back up. But you can end their suffering. Just one attack button, you just stab them, they're dead. The benefit of that is that it gives you another point of resolve to work with, like instantly. That you don't always get when you actually make a kill. It'll maybe refill maybe a third to half your resolve. But if you end somebody suffering, you get a full dot of that. In the later game, like I think 8 or 9 points of resolve at my access at any time. In the beginning of the game, you only get like 2 or 3. Resolve in the late game is access for a lot of your special moves like the Heavenly Strike and the Death Dance and stuff like that. In the early game, it is the way that you recover health,
Oh
um,
man.
especially in the middle of a fight. So because especially if you're not maybe a little slower to learn the combat, like you're getting used to the fact that you're not getting a flashing indicator anytime somebody attacks you. Like, okay, we're learning, we're getting hit a lot, we're learning. We're a little low on health. We don't have a resolve, and here's this asshole trying to crawl away. So push the one guy away, go stab his friend, and then get hyped up, and then go fight the next dude. Um,
I feel suddenly invigorated by my murder of
yes,
this person crawling away from the combat.
yeah. How dare he try to run away and survive? Die like a man. Um, God, I love the outfits in the game. I find myself consistently switching in between outfits as I go. Where like you have the traveler's attire, which the nice thing about that, it reveals more of the mini map as you travel. The controller will vibrate when you're near artifacts and collectibles and stuff like that. Um, there's one other effect, I don't remember what it is, but like it's stuff like that. You have the samurai clan armor, which gives you more resolve when you kill somebody. It gives you pretty huge boost to health, which is different than the Sakai clan armor, which gives you the additional standoff point and allows you to have more health but deal more damage. There's the traveling Ronin outfit, which makes you harder to detect and you deal like more damage by percentage. Uh,
Mm.
Stuff like that. Like the outfits, they have tangible bonuses, and there's reasons why you would wear XYZ suit of armor or outfit for any given scenario. The really nice thing is you can like the armor is what does it. The hat and the face covering are really more cosmetic than anything else, and like the helmets you look so cool no matter what.
That's really cool. Yeah.
When I remember a time where
Check out.
when I saw like when you see like some of those old samurai armor that has like the face mask, like I remember like as a kid I'm like, well, that looks kind of weird and dumb. But now in the game I'm like, all right, we're gonna go fight 30 dudes. Cool, they deserve to stare death in the face.
That was a similar experience I've had uh, looking at suits of armor when I was a little kid. It's easy to feel like it's like that looks a little silly. Like they look a little bit kind of portly, and they can look a little silly. But when you're looking at one in the face and imagining some 6'5" dude wearing this thing, it's like it's not all that silly anymore. This guy doesn't need a weapon to kill you. He can just punch you in the face.
I've read a couple things that say the archery in the game is a little overpowered. I'm not great at aiming with an analog stick. I'm passing at best, which is funny because I played all of Doom Eternal on Nightmare with an Xbox controller, so take that for what it's
Damn.
worth. Not gonna do an Ultra Nightmare run. Fuck that. um, but I can see why some people, because if you have that like snap aim ability that some people develop, I mean, you can deal a lot of damage with a half bow. I mean, headshots are an instant kill. The long bow is really nice. The explosive varies you get with it, I think, is where people think it's maybe a little OP because it's a big old
Can you do
firebomb.
can you just go like full horse archery?
It's hard, but yes.
I feel like if you got really good at that, you'd be pretty much unstoppable.
Yeah, I mean, there's a fair amount in the game where you're expected to engage in melee combat, and a lot of the
Hmm.
story modes in particular. The story beats are really good. There's one moment. For those of you who are listening, I'm trying to stay as spoiler free as possible. There is a moment where you're beating back a Mongol siege, and the whole atmosphere of the whole thing feels really good. It feels really intense. You have this drive to, I have to both chop down these Mongols as efficiently as possible while still, like, I am the best warrior here by leagues. These are all farmers who have resolve and they have the will to fight, but they're not warriors. They're just warriors at heart. There is a difference. So you have this kind of split between, okay, I need to fight them and protect them and all this kind of stuff. And all the meanwhile, you have arrows raining down and they have the siege weapons up top and everything. You have to go deal with them, so you end up cutting a bloody path by yourself because you're the ghost at this point. You're not just some jackass with a sword. Not that you ever were. You know, you go up to the hill, you deal with the siege weapons, you come back because you realize the Mongols have the infantry is pushed in full. You have your standoff with the general in the courtyard of the castle. You kill his ass, but instead of just like regular, oh, stab dead, this is the moment where you unlock your super kill ability where you slaughter him. And as he's like trying to walk away from the fight, like trying to get away, you come just one swish, heads off. And now Jin is like shouting at them like, come and face me, you cowards, die like men. Like all this stuff, you activate the ghost power, which is your, here's three guys that don't get to be alive anymore. And as you then chase the Mongols as they're trying to fight and flee at the same time out of the town, they do this, and it's such a story beat thing, but it is what it is, where they decide everything is a one-hit kill for you. Why not? It's a cool story moment. So you get to have this
That's so
awesome
cool.
countercharge moment as you're going down the steps of the town, just one after another. And the idea is you're supposed to be able to charge up ghost mode like 4 times by the time you get there. But I kept getting hit on the way down, which resets the whole thing. But it's the game does such a good job of capturing these really good story beats and story
Mhm.
moments that like I spent a lot of time because I probably played the game for a good 20 some odd hours now. I think I spent all day yesterday playing it, uh, and I spent most of my time screwing around in the lower third of the island trying to like fully liberate it and do all the side quests there. So I'm maybe a little overpowered at this point, and I know I can see how I'm going to snowball hard into the latter
Mhm.
third of the game. I'm a little annoyed I didn't go and pick this power up sooner, because like it's it's good. Like this is your, I'm done dealing with this. I need to clear 3 guys out right now, and I've done well enough that it can
Mhm.
justify that. Um, but yeah, it's just I know I'm not without my gripes for the game, but I am too rose-colored glasses right now to really see what my issues with the game are going to be. And I'm sure once I'm probably going to do a couple of playthroughs of this game because it's there's so much to experience. I'm going to guess that the issues that I'm going to have with it are going to be the same issues I have with pretty much any open world action adventure RPG in the vein of Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Shadow of War and all these other games where the activities they're fun, they're varied for the most part, But a lot of it's a lot of go to X location and kill Y amounts of people. The game helps break it up a little bit by like, I mean, the biggest thing. I mean, how many games have you played with a waypoint system?
A lot, like all of them.
Where like you'll have a radar and it'll have like, okay, it'll just like display, like Skyrim is probably the worst offender, but I mean really every game does
Sure.
this, where they display the marker on the map and you go to, and it's either displayed through a mini map or there's an actual visual representation.
Sure.
This game has a waypoint system. The way it does it is so brilliant. Once you're within like 50 to 60 meters of something, it'll display a little marker. Just because like sometimes it get a little easy to miss stuff like that, especially on a TV screen. But the way it does it when you're actually like traveling, when you have to go halfway across the island, it doesn't show a marker. You swipe up on the touchpad for the PlayStation controller, and that will cause the wind to blow.
Oh, that's really
And
cool.
the wind direction tells you the general direction of where you need to be. It doesn't tell you the route you need to take. It doesn't show you a nice little line on a map because there's no mini map. It just
That's so cool.
points you in the direction. The way you happen upon like the health shrines and or the health spots and the some side quests and the haiku spots, there will be a little golden bird that will kind of flutter around and appear. Follow the bird, see where it goes. For
Those are
the
such cool little details to improve immersion. You know.
and the Inari shrines that can increase the amount of charms you can have, little active or passive effects that you can have. You follow these foxes and they'll lead you to it, and at the end of it you pray at your shrine and then you pet the fox, which is about as close as you get to petting the dog as possible, and they're adorable. It's such a thing where I've played Ghosts of Tsushima before because I've played all the games that it is derivative of. It is a very derivative experience, and I think that I don't know, that sounds like a criticism, and it's not, because the expectation I think of the gaming industry, and I expect this out of art and film, well, film maybe more so, and games the most. You're expected to learn from what has come before. We often talk about, oh well, XYZ game couldn't exist unless we wouldn't have Doom if we didn't have Wolfenstein first. Good. It means they looked at something, they learned, and they improved upon it. We wouldn't have we wouldn't have Doom 2016 if it weren't for XYZ thing. We wouldn't have Doom Eternal without, or actually, we wouldn't have Doom if we didn't have Rage, and Rage was a subpart. Well, I mean a subpart, but it wasn't a great experience. It was fine. We wouldn't have Call of Duty without the Battlefield franchise. We wouldn't have Battlefield without the Medal of Honor games. We wouldn't have Breath of the Wild without Assassin's Creed. Good. It means somebody looked at an experience, said, that was good. How can we improve upon that and make that better? The fact that I can feel Breath of the Wild and Assassin's Creed and all these other games, the DNA of these games, even more recent entries like Horizon Zero Dawn and even Spider-Man and all these things. The fact that I can see these experiences in this one game, to me, is not a criticism. It does not make it badly derivative. It means they looked at every other experience and said, how can we do that but better? And in a way that is fun and makes sense. It is... I don't know.
It's kind of like Beethoven's First Symphony isn't good because you can tell he has Mozartian influences. It's like, okay.
Yeah, Mozart was a fantastic... He was a little jackass, but he was a fantastic composer.
Like Mozart was not good because he sounds a lot like Haydn in his earlier works. It's like, okay, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, who cares? Like that game is good because of all these other games that were also fantastic. I think my only my only criticism, and I'm sure this was done intentionally. There's not a huge upgrade tree. And it's a personal thing for me. I like having a wide variety of different moves and upgrades and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But at the same time, if I sit down and actually count, okay, you have 4 stances and 4 upgrades per stance, and you have the 2 combat trees here, and you have the exploration tree with the exploration upgrades here, which are only 5 of them, and then you have, your 5 tools that are unlocked throughout the game just through growing your legend. And here's your 7 ghost abilities and those other variables. So I mean, there's probably like 40 or 50 upgrades in the game. It's just I think the problem is I spent way too much time dicking around in the lower third, and now I'm a little too powerful for the game to handle. I wouldn't say the game is easy. There's a little bit of a curve going into it, but it's not the same curve that you would experience playing like Bloodborne or Sekiro. It's definitely a lot easier than those experiences. It's definitely a lot more accessible.
For me, with upgrade trees, I find upgrade trees really satisfying unless it's very clear that if I'm very careful about getting all the secrets, I can get everything. Then it's less exciting to me, actually, because I'm like, I'm not making choices, I'm just checking off things on a list. It's like there is no incentive to make creative decisions because it's like, oh, you just get everything. The correct thing to do is get more, not say, how can I, make a decision about what I want to prioritize. Which is bad because I'm a freaking little raccoon for upgrade things. Like I've been sniffing out those Praetor tokens.
Oh yeah.
Like I need it.
See,
Where's the little robot?
It's a funny thing whenever I pick up, and Bethesda games, Fallout and Skyrim are the 2 games where like the first thing I do after I play the game vanilla, the first thing I look for are not conversion mods. I'm not looking for visual upgrades or whatever. I'm just looking for stuff that adds more just objects and crap into the game, where you can have you have your assault rifle, your pistol, your shotgun, or whatever. But I want 17 kinds of assault rifle that really actually don't do anything different. They're all the same, but I like that they look different and that like have slightly different stats. And I'm kind of amazed that in Ghost of Tsushima you have 1 sword and I think it's a wakizashi. Those are the 2 weapons you got, and you pick up a couple bows and that's it. Never once have I thought, oh man, I really wish I could have another sword. I don't need one. I would love for the game to present some additional weapon types, because the Naginata was around at that point, and that's the sword spear. That is,
which is has the thing about that is I'm a super nerd about this stuff, and I've done some research about weaponry. Is like, in terms of fighting on the battlefield against people who have armor on, sword, not the best choice. Sword spear, however,
yeah,
excellent choice.
Yeah, they're like, let's take this katana and put it on a 6-foot pole.
Yeah,
we're gonna ride a horse around and stab his fuck you. I would love to have, like, if they make Ghost of Tsushima 2 or whatever the spiritual successor is, to add in the Naginata, and to add, I believe it's called the Kanabo, which, if it's the one I'm thinking of, it is a gargantuan club with metal studs.
Nails in it.
Yeah.
Oh my god,
yeah.
I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, you think a Warhammer's badass? I don't think so.
That is a high-class baseball bat.
I was gonna say, I want to walk onto the battlefield with punk rock and a bat. I'm gonna walk
a baseball bat with studs on it. That is fantastic.
I want to walk out here with a stick with more studs than a Hot Topic. Like, we're here to party.
Fuck your armor.
Yeah.
Your armor is merely a convenient method of transferring my blunt force from the outside to the inside.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, dude, like, we have it's one of fifth edition's art failing because we're all going to pick apart at fifth edition this game that we love. Um, it represents medieval European weapons very much, but like when it comes to like how are we going to represent uh, a lot
Oh,
of East
hold
Asian
on, you cut
weapons?
out for
Well,
me.
well, you're frozen, but I can hear you.
Hang on. Oh God. Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you. Oh, there we go.
Oh, good. Okay, cool. You were saying.
Um, I don't know. I was just there's a part of me would love to see like East Asian weapons make it into fifth edition, but then I'm sitting here. I'm like, well, I mean, what is a kanabo but just a differently shaped maul? What is a katana but a differently shaped longsword like XYZ thing? We don't need to
Sure,
separate.
and
We
I
can just
think
rename them.
right, and I think that's the argument that would be made in favor of fifth edition is those are very vague things that you could, I mean, it's certainly coded for European style, but you could recode it pretty easily. The thing that was always that's always frustrating to me, and I've long accepted that fifth edition is just you can't fix this in fifth edition. It's not broken, but like make a new system if you want to do this, if you want to care about this. But it always kind of bothered me. It's like it's it's an equally good choice to attack someone wearing plate mail with a sword or with a warhammer. It's like no, that's really not true. Like one of those is an objectively better choice. But I accept that in fifth edition, the amount of contortion you would have to do to make that make sense, I'm not sure would even be possible. And even if it was, would kind of contort the game so much that it would just be like, just make a new system.
Yeah, it's not
And please
fun at that
do, by
point.
the way. um, yeah. Thinking about fifth edition, I've been thinking about this. All your talk about Ghost of Tsushima has made me been thinking about this next D&D game that I want to run once ours finishes up, which is going to be actually in almost exactly the same time period. Like we're talking off by less than a decade. Uh, but I've been thinking about what system I want to use, and I know we've talked a little bit about. You actually recommended to me Zweihanda, and I've been reading through that a little bit. Uh, and it's tough because I don't know. It's one of those things where you get into this question of do you want to run a campaign in a system you haven't played? And I feel like that's hard. And it's something I saw on Reddit the other day. Someone was saying that they said I have a hard rule of never playing. Well, let me back up on this. There was a thread talking about what we often talk about, which is a lot of people tend to get attached to fifth edition and then never play anything else. And the thread was kind of complaining about this, and was the original post was saying, "Hey, it's kind of annoying that people do this. Like, why do people do this?" And some things that were brought up on that I actually thought were interesting. And one of the biggest ones that kind of resonated for me a little bit, and I think you might actually be able to resonate with this as well, is this idea of like, I have two choices: play with fifth edition or play by myself. And it very much is that truth of like not I'm not trying to call out our group at all, but I think that for a lot of people there is that idea of, well, I can try to get my whole group to learn this new system, or I can just try to finagle the system we already know. And yeah, it might be technically more work, but socially it won't. Which I think is a fair argument. Like I remember when you were trying to get us to play Dungeon World, and that never really stuck anyway, even though I actually really enjoyed it. I mean, I feel like you had to do a little bit of cajoling to get us to show up for the session because we were used to playing fifth edition, and I think there is that difficulty. And some people were saying on that thread, they were saying, oh well, there's lots of really easy systems that you can do, like one.
Uh oh. I think I lost you again. Well, this is the moment where Nathan is just alone with his thoughts for a second. So, to pick up on what Brennan was saying, um, well, I mean, I could pick up on what Brennan was saying, but I think that would be disingenuous. I'm not the kind of person to finish the man's thoughts, um, but I would like to. So, this is the part of the podcast that Brennan will only see in the video version, where I actually talk about how he is a fantastic friend. Brennan is a good person, gosh darn it, and I really have enjoyed his friendship over the years, and I hope he goes and listens to the audio version. You can hear, I can't hear you. That's the weird thing. Because he's telling me that he can hear me but can't see me moving. I wonder if we just need to restart the call. Um, that might. Oh, yep. Whoa, that's a lot of me face. Oh boy, wasn't ready for that. A lot of my face, just right there, in the face. Oh boy, yep. Oh, can't hear you, buddy. I don't know if you're talking. Like, I love troubleshooting live. It's the best thing in the world. Oh boy. Oh man. Oh dear, oh my. Okay, let's just end the call. Yeah, it's going all right. Yep. Don't go away. Nope. Um, but the cut in and out done. Video and all. Oh man. Oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy. Oh god, oh man. Here we go. Yep. So, this is going to be fun. This is going to be a fun video version of the podcast. To anybody watching live, I'm sorry. As I just slowly go insane. Uh, it's boy howdy is. I know people have been having Discord issues for a while now. In general, I know was it Friday, like nobody could get Discord to really work. Um, unplug it and plug it back in again. I don't know. I can tell he has internet because, like, you know, he can hear me, and two, all that good. So you can hear me? Is that the deal? Like, you can hear me, but you can't see me or anything. Apparently, I should restart Discord. I'm gonna restart Discord. Do 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 do. Okay, how do I okay, this is the fun part where you guys get to see troubleshooting. Close, open. That didn't do anything. Hang on. Cool. No, not log out. Hang on. I'm gonna leave this all in on purpose. You guys deserve to see this. This insanity. This just absolute bonkers stuff that is happening. As we try to make things work. Huh. So the funny thing is that it's not even showing him as online. That's really weird. But yeah, to speak more to this fantastic game that I've been playing, Ghost of Tsushima. I'm really, the thing that has really floored me with this game more than anything else is the voice acting and the way names and places are pronounced. Where, I mean, when the Mongolians talk about Genghis Khan, they don't use the anglicized pronunciation of the name. They use Chinggis Khan, which is much closer to being correct in what would have been Old Mongolian at the time. Um, just in general, the way the voice actors for characters like Jin. Ah, oh, I hear you.
Ah,
I think we did it. What?
ah,
Can, can
we're,
you hear me?
we're good. Yes.
We did it. We did it, Reddit.
I don't know what happened.
I don't either. It's too God. So you were saying about you were saying about people talking about using simpler systems.
Oh, yeah, just that uh I don't know, I haven't spent a ton of time exploring those simpler systems, but I feel like at least for me, my desires to depart from 5th edition have often been to seek more complexity, or at least an equivalent level of complexity focused in a different way, not to seek less. For me, 5th edition is about as non-complex as I really want it to be. Um, I think, and this is kind of getting into a whole like rabbit hole of discussion about DMing, which fuck it, I'll just go into. So the thing I think that I've been thinking about a lot, because I've been doing all this reading for this campaign that I want to run. By the way, if you wanted to say more about Ghost of Tsushima, please do. I don't want to like shift us to a new conversation before you were done with what you wanted to say.
The only other thing, and I said this in the where I was just by myself in my own insanity, but this is something you'll appreciate. The very fact that the voice actors are, they seem to either know the pronunciations off the top of their heads or were coached very heavily. The fact
really
that
cool.
a lot of the Japanese clan names and places and things like that are said so succinctly and so perfectly. I mean, I don't speak Japanese, so take it for what it's worth. But it seems that the inflection is all correct and the pronunciation is all good. Really speaks to it. The fact that Mongolians do not call it is not Genghis Khan, it is Chinggis Khan, which would have been more correct to Mongolian at the time than the anglicized version of the famous 13th century warlord's name, which
I knew about the Chinggis part. I didn't know about the Han.
we can blame the Italians for that. Anyway,
I can blame them for a lot of things.
But yeah, go into your bit about.
Well, yeah, I did actually want to mention this. This is a combination of, because like I said, I've been thinking a lot about this game I want to run, which I think I'm hopeful that it will be really fun for everybody. I'm hopeful people will be interested in the premise. I mean, I would hope so since you guys voted for it.
Really depressing.
It's been fun to read about. I've actually learned a lot of really interesting stuff. I actually got 2 new books in the mail today. I've ordered a bunch of history books about the Mongols, the Song Dynasty. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. That's just my phonetic rendering of Pinyin, which I know is not how Pinyin works, but I'm doing my best. Fun fact, I literally read this 2 hours ago. Chinggis Khan, he famously said, a man should only get drunk 3 times a month at most. Better if it's only 2, best if it's only 1, and if he doesn't drink at all, he would truly be a man without equal. Which I thought was funny. It's kind of contrary to what you might imagine based on stereotypes just of, nomad peoples in general. But anyway, the thing that I was thinking a lot about in terms of systems, and I promise all of this will come to a head at some point, in terms of systems, was thinking about the concept of when you run a game, you have to balance what you want to do versus what your players want to do. You have to balance the kind of game you want to run with the kind of game your players want to play. And this is something that I've really tried with mixed levels of success. Really tried hard to make the core of my DMing style is what are my players going to enjoy? Now, the arrogant part of that is sometimes I feel like I know better than them what they would enjoy. Very occasionally, I feel like I've been vindicated. Usually, I'm not. Um, very occasionally, but listen, kids, listen to your friends. But anyway, uh, to get to the point of this convoluted and meandering shitstorm of a speech, I was talking to Alec. I won't share details of the conversation without his permission, but just in general, I don't think he would care if I was showing this. It's not like sensitive or anything. We were talking about the game, and I just was asking if he wanted to play, and he said, well, maybe not, because he was saying that he's recognized that the part of D&D that he really likes is being a superhero, which totally makes sense. And for me as a player and as a DM, I think the part of D&D that I always really like is the immersion. I like really being able to get way into the world, being able to see the pictures, smell the smells, hear the sounds of this experience, really feel like this is could be a real thing happening. These are real people having real experiences. And that's why my games tend to be really heavy on the role play. I try to really encourage like story-based, character-driven role play a lot of the time, because that's what I like. However, there are people who are just as valid as my opinion who like to be like, I'm going to walk into this room and kill all these guys and save the princess or the prince, as it may be, or steal all the treasure or recover all the treasure from the thieves. They want to be that unstoppable titan. And it's that moment of looking into different systems and what they do, I think really can sometimes come down to a question of the DM wanting to do something, and going into that, kind of linking it to what they were saying on Reddit about having trouble getting people to come over from 5th edition to a new edition. I think that the reason for that is when one person in a group wants to shift to a new edition, that person is often doing so, I think, because they want play to move in a different direction. So like for Zweihanda, for example, my inclination, you suggested it, but having read it and become interested in it, my inclination to move towards that system is that it encourages, it moves you closer to that real experience, because it forces players to make intelligent decisions about, or I should say, careful decisions about combat, because any sword thrust could be your last. The game is set up such that there is never a guarantee that this encounter will not kill you. Whereas in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, most of the intelligence happens before you roll initiative. Like, yes, you can make poor decisions in combat, but a lot of it is this decision to, okay, I'm going to engineer the situation such that when I roll initiative, I know we're going to win. And you can always get screwed over by the dice. But there's only a certain degree to which you can get screwed over by the dice statistically. And if you're a barbarian with 350 hit points and 20 AC, and you're going into a fight against a bunch of peasants, like, you're just going to win. I would say a good DM should probably maybe not even roll that fight, unless, the players want to just kick some ass. If it were me, I'd probably be like, yeah, you just kill those dudes. Like, in my game, for example, it's kind of assumed that you don't have a lot of random encounters anymore, because if you run into any bandits, they're just gonna be like, excuse me, sir, could you direct me to the nearest place of worship? I wish to mend my ways. Like, so it's got me thinking, and credit to Alec for kind of pushing my brain in this direction. It's just gotten me thinking about motivations for moving to a new system. and particularly in terms of my game, it's the question of how much do I want to. It's the question of balancing my desire to have a game a certain way with the player's desire to have a game a certain way. And I think that's why, as you've advocated, I think very rightly a lot of times, having that session zero for any kind of role play experience is so important because it allows you to discuss those situations. Maybe even, I mean, we haven't faced this a lot in our group, but maybe even decide what system you want to use. Kind of making sure people are on the same page, you know? I think that's so important.
It's generally assumed in our group of friends, and rightly so, that when we're going to sit down and play, we're probably going to play 5th edition.
Sure.
I think people give it's a weird thing, and I think this happens when anything hits like a critical mass when it comes to popularity, where if it's household name enough and enough people play it, you're going to get fringe elements. They're just like, oh, it sucks. No,
Right.
it doesn't. 5th edition is
Exactly.
fantastic. It's a great role-playing system.
Things
Yeah,
usually don't become popular because they're bad.
yeah, it became popular because it's pretty all in all, it's pretty good. Um, I I've wanted to try other role playing systems, not necessarily because I want to break away from 5th edition and the stories that it can tell, but just to see what else is out there. It's why I wanted to play Dungeon World because I like the way it looks and feels to a certain extent. I like that it gives me maybe a little more freedom to explain how things are happening in combat and allows players to be maybe, I don't want to say more creative because I don't think creativity is this weird thing. I don't remember who talked about this, but if you've ever done a Mad Lib where they give you, adjective, noun, verb, whatever, and you're really shooting for the moon, you can create some really crazy stuff. But if somebody gives you a pen and 40 pages of paper and says, write me a story, your mind will probably go blank for the first 20 minutes trying to figure out what you're going to do. Constraint can create creativity in a lot of situations where the more you stipulate, the more your players or you as the creator or what have you is probably going to come up with more what may feel like more diverse and more creative things. Part of that is because there's less to think about, so you can dedicate your thoughts to any given scenario. So I'm not going to say, I'm going to redact and say that you can't, I'm not going to say that you can't be creative in 5th edition's combat, for example. There's a lot of room for creativity. And we may think there's not room for creativity because there's always a what would be considered an optimal move in any given scenario, but not even that is true. You have for the fighter 9 times out of 10, guess what? You're probably using the attack action. But there's always going to be that 1 out of 10 moment where you're at the top of the tower. It's a 150-foot drop. The enemy's on the edge. You could use the attack action, or you can push him.
Mm-hmm. Those are the moments I think make role-playing games shine. Those are the moments where you get to do that thing you always wanted to do in video games. Those are the moments where you get to be like, why the hell can't I just push this guy off the cliff? Guess what? You can't.
Yeah.
That's the best thing about role-playing games to me. And getting more, I mean, you're exactly right. And I think that the notion of creativity sometimes being enhanced by constraint is a very good one to talk about. I think that can be true of the combat in 5th edition as well. I think that where I have the most trouble I have with 5th edition, and again, it's a great system. I'm definitely not hating on 5th edition. I love 5th edition. I always will want to play 5th edition.
Right.
The one thing that does irk me sometimes, especially going into a game like the one I'm thinking about running, I feel like the class system can be really limiting. And that's a discussion that people have had. People who are smarter and better informed than me have had a lot. Is the idea of a class system being kind of limiting. But just for me, it's this idea of like, well, why can't I be a dude who wields a great axe really well, but also knows how to pick locks? You know, why can't I be someone who speaks? Why can't I make my whole character someone who speaks like 20 languages and have like that is someone who in a real life adventure such as they existed, which I mean you can argue that they did. Having someone in the group who like can't fight but is just kind of bright and speaks like 20 languages would be an incredible asset.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
In 5th edition, that is a wasted character.
It is a wasted character in the scenarios that you and I have played in.
That is fair. But you can
Travis
make
brings
a
up a good
strong
point.
argument.
That was Roland, and Roland was awesome.
That's true. That is true. But you know that I think that the constraint enhancing creativity is true, but it also can be frustrating if you have a specific idea and you can't do it because of the constraints. Like if you say, a I want to be someone who like channels the like I want to be like a wizard, but I want to be a healer wizard. It's like, well, you can't. You have to be a cleric. It's like, well, I don't want to be a religious dude. Like I want to be someone who like thinks about science and mathematics but uses that to heal people. It's like, well, you can't do that. And that's what's kind of frustrating, you know? And thinking about particularly when you try to run a system. I mean, this is again. I think this is where 5th edition can be a bad choice for these types of games. I'm still not decided what I'm going to do about that because the world's learning, like doing all this learning about the scenario itself, is complicated enough. I might want to retreat to 5th edition so I know what I'm doing, but we'll see what happens. The issue I think that you run into is it's really not well designed for no magic. If you're like no magic, it's like, okay, you can have what 3 of the fighter subclasses out of, or I guess you could have 4 out of the 6, and I think also 4 out of the 6, maybe even 5 out of the 6 rogue archetypes, and then like nothing else. You could make an argument for some of the barbarians, but only really like the frenzy. All the other ones are magic, and then every other class has magic just built right into the framework. And while I think you can actually have some pretty interesting parties comprised of like all fighters and rogues, for example, and that could be interesting to see. I think it could be interesting to see fighters, rogues, and frenzy barbarians. You know, it's really not what the system was meant for. I feel like.
Well,
I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Because what you're boiling it down to. I know you're not in Twitch chat. Travis mentioned that we've been trying. What I've wanted to do for a long time is run Curse of Strahd, but it's an all barbarian party, and the coup de grace is going to be everybody grapples Strahd and then runs in a different direction. We literally just rip Strahd limb from limb.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton.
Let's see if it pays off. But
I would love to play that. By the way, Travis, I'm still waiting for the all half-orc barbarian game that you said you were going to run, like 3 years ago. I'm still waiting. I'm ready.
I would love that as a one shot. Although as a running game, I mean, you know me.
I mean, I wouldn't hate it.
It's almost a half-orc fighter, but it'll do for me. It's almost half-orc champion, so you know I'll get what I want. So the thing about that is your combat encounters in particular, I think, are going to suffer the most once you have that no magic fighter, rogue, and one barbarian type thing, where it's 5th edition's combat is designed in such a way that you're kind of supposed to be able to have those additional options available, I think. And when I as much as I tried to make it sound like a joke to ease it, it was a very real criticism I had of the original draft of your armor rules, was you have the very real risk of having these slugfest fights where you're just rolling dice until somebody dies, which is how most fights
did happen.
Yeah, which is how fights between a martial class and a martial monster are going to go anyway, but it's just going to take longer. with when you boil it down to all fighters rogues, and the only creatures that you encounter are going to be some kind of riff off of that. There's probably a better system for that will simulate that combat in a more fun way.
Mhm.
Because the combat is kind of designed in such a way that, maybe you have all these dudes, maybe it'd be easier to just throw a fireball at them, or maybe it'd be easier if we had some spells that we could affect things, and then the fighter can go in and be even more deadly than they already were, in any given regard. There's probably a grid-based combat system that would work really well for that. I wouldn't know what it is, or
Yeah,
what would
I've been
what would play
needing to
well
do
for
some
that.
looking into that. I've been focused kind of on reading up on the history stuff because that's independent of the system.
Right, right. I know you've been
Um,
doing a lot of reading on that.
I have just I mean I didn't quite finish this last book that I was reading because it got up to like the 20th century and I was like that's interesting and I do want to read about that but not right now, you know. So I'm moving on to this book I got which is about Chinggis Khan and his conquests specifically. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's for me it's a cool opportunity to kind of fill in that gap in my own historical education, which I think is shared by a lot of Americans, particularly white Americans, is just because we don't really have any reason to look into that at all beyond what we're taught in school, and what we're taught in school is not very much, you know. Um, but it's been a cool way for me to do that, and also to do something that everyone is interested in. You know, it seems like everybody's kind of gung ho about the idea.
It's a
But yeah, in terms
really
of systems,
interesting concept. I'm going to be interested to see how it kind of pans out.
yeah, and I think that the success or failure of it as a fun experience is going to depend a lot on whether or not I can find that good system. Because ideally, what I'd love to have would be a system whereby you can have a party where like one of you says, "I want to be," because this is actually the right time period for it. One of you says, "I want to be a samurai who's in China for some reason," and then one of you is like, "I'm a merchant from like Persia who's here for some reason," and one of you is like, "I am a Mongol rider," like, and that makes sense why that'd be here, and like where you can have those really quite different styles of character all within the realm of not having magic. And I think if I can find a system where that will work well, it'll be really successful.
It's going to be interesting, I think. Um,
But first, you have to beat up Mother Nature.
yeah, wait to finish up your fetch quest. I joke. It's fine. I found a way
I
to
know.
circumvent it. So, uh, if
You
I
think
if I can find a way to get around any fetch quests, goddamn well I will.
I
Um,
know.
oh gosh, one system I've always wanted to run, but it has nothing to do with the system itself. It's just because I wanted. It's the power fantasy that I want to be able to run. Is to run one of the Warhammer 40k things,
Oh
because
yeah.
I want to give you guys the opportunity to be decked out in super cool space armor and go mortar orcs and xenomorphs and stuff like that. But at the same time, I'm kind of looking at them like, I'm sure like 3 sessions of that would be fun, and then it would just boil down to having to do statistics based math, and I hate that. So I don't know. I think I have the Dark Heresy books now, but I don't even know if I haven't sat down and read them yet.
Hmm.
Um, in a completely different vein, because I know we're coming up on an hour and a half, and we'll probably wrap it up after this. One of the things I wanted to chat with you about, you and I both were, and to an extent are, performers. We did a lot of stuff on stage and as musicians and stuff like that. And I wanted to chat with you about what were your rituals before you would go into a performance. What were your here's what I do, here's what I don't. Were there specific foods and drinks and stuff like that you would specifically seek out or avoid, all that kind of stuff. Um, so I wanted to,
Yeah.
I realize that the way I go about it is a little bit different, but I need to maybe reaffirm that before I think, oh yeah, I'm weird.
Okay. I'm trying to think about it. It's one of those situations where I always kind of felt like, oh, I don't have that, but I probably do. So I'm just trying to be really like really self-aware and think back about that. I know that one thing that I would do is I would make sure to eat a certain amount of time beforehand, but I feel like that's pretty common. Most people don't want to go out there with a stomach full of like spaghettios. Uh, I would drink a lot of water. Okay, here's a weird thing that I do. Maybe I don't know if this is weird or not. I will go pee like 5 to 7 times in the hour before the
Oh
show
yeah.
starts because I'm like I want to be dead empty on stage. Like I want to not even be thinking about having to go to the bathroom for the whole show, or at least until intermission. And I drink a lot of water backstage, so that maybe that's something that's unusual that I do. Sometimes I would do like breathing exercises. I think the main thing that I would do though, the biggest thing for me would be to get really hyped, to try to really hype myself up in terms of rather than trying to dispel any adrenaline or dispel any sense of nervousness, trying to channel that into a sense of excitement, a sense of desire to get going to the point where whenever I would get up to like half hour before a show, I was always just like, let's go. I want to go now. I want to go now. I don't want to wait another half an hour. I want to start right now. And I think that was I never really had much stage fright. Um, as long as I prepped enough, which I usually made sure to do. Whenever I could, I would try really hard to be like rock solid. But as long as I was rock solid, I usually didn't have a lot of stage fright. But I would have that nervous energy, and I would try to really channel that, really take a moment to myself to really channel that mentally into, this is what you like to do. You're gonna have a great time, and you're gonna do great. You know. So what about you? What is your ritual that you think is so weird?
So I know for
Because I've been in shows with you.
whenever we had a morning performance, it was a little bit different. Like I had a different way of going about it that some people might even call professional. But I am not going to talk too much about that because the actual 10 a.m. morning performance that I've had, I could probably count on my left hand. It's always been either matinees or evening shows.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for actual serious rituals, I would take maybe a couple minutes before going on stage, and put myself in the mindset of the character where it was
That too. I
weird.
would also do that.
Scion was the only show that I wasn't able to do this in. It's because of how difficult the music was. I had to be focused as a musician, not as a performer.
Oh man,
Um,
that was so hard.
yeah, and well, I mean, we all, those of us who actually learned the music, really struggled with it. And those of us who didn't learn the
Uh-oh.
music also struggled with it for a very, very different reason. Um,
Oh no.
but in literally every other performance I've done, since I was probably about 15 or 16, and I believe this is what they call method acting, um, but with a little more guidance. The second I pass, or the second I step into like that wing of the curtain, the person we know as Nathan stops existing for however long the character of, let's say, Jean Valjean or Cinderella's Prince or Professor Bear. For as long as that character's on stage, Nathan does not exist as a person. So much so that later in life, what would happen is me as Nathan can remember, getting a costume, getting makeup, all this stuff. The first step to stage, I remember the lights, and then literally the next thing I will remember is those couple steps after getting off stage.
Wow. Yeah, I'm
Um,
definitely not like that. That's
where,
interesting.
well, I mean, some people call it dealing with traumatic experiences. And being on stage is very traumatic, believe it or not. I don't get stage fright, weirdly enough, though. It's never something I've ever dealt with. But so I would take that second or that brief second, maybe to prep myself to remember, like, you're gonna get this time block back eventually. You're gonna remember. Somebody's gonna tell you, and you're gonna remember right now. Like, you're gonna be this character for a little bit, so just deal with that. But like, I
Oh boy.
and again, Scion is an anomaly, but generally speaking, I don't warm up before performances.
Oh, see, I do.
Um,
I have to.
I I mean, I'm not making a run straight to Taco Bell beforehand, but I really don't give a shit what I eat or drink before a performance. I actually, yes, this did. I think this did happen. No, it wasn't for Scion. It was for something else, but I think it was something that Dr. Brown directed, where before going on stage, what I had to consume, for that, it was either lunch or dinner. I had like a 4 cheese grilled sandwich and a big old glass of milk going before
Oh,
stage. Um, like I just I and maybe it's something that my wherever my tessitura or wherever it sits and everything like that, where I can just ignore a lot of that stuff that bothers other vocalists. And I know some of it is attributed to being a bass baritone, where for some, like,
yeah.
a lot of those, like, basses and Russian basses, where sometimes their pregame ritual is a glass of whiskey and a couple of cigars, like, and
I
then go
can't
sing for the
fathom
Russian
that.
opera. So I
I mean,
think that might be a little bit of leftover.
even now, and it's been a few years since we've sung together. Even now, I'm still a pretty light lyric, so it's a lot different for me. And I'm younger too. You know.
Well, even before, when I was doing performances with the choir that I was with, because I realized I have a fair amount of stage experience, but I actually don't have a lot of collegiate stage experience. I didn't really
Mhm.
do any shows, except for the tail end of my time at Azusa, and I only did really the one opera and the opera scenes thing. Um, but even when we did Don Giovanni at APU, like, I didn't. I mean, I don't really care about these people anymore, so whatever. I didn't warm up. I I was in a bad place in my life, so I sort of barely knew the music. But I had other
Mhm.
issues going on, which is probably why. I would, eat whatever, drink whatever, I didn't care. Because I knew I could go on and just, because it wasn't, and that was the other thing. I have, and I know this, and I always feel like I'm bragging when I say this. I have a fairly extreme range. It's shrank a little bit just because I haven't been exercising it, but at my peak, my range was a low C sharp and I could consistently and comfortably sing a high C.
Bruh.
That I was it was one of those things where I could not quite get to that. I mean, to make it sound impressive, you don't call it a C sharp at the top, you call it a D flat. Um, I was never able to get that consistently to sound the way I wanted it to, but when I was really working on the range and really getting everything to expand and doing all the proper valve modification and regularly stretching that to its limit, and making sure that I wasn't ever pushing it further than what I could, because the idea is that you expand it out to that and then you try and figure, okay, what's comfortable past that. And for my low end, comfortably speaking, probably a low D, low E flat typically was really where I would traditionally sit, because once I get into that D C sharp range, it's very much like it's really maybe a little more vocal fry than anything else. I can't, especially after a long day, I can't really like replicate it. And for
Man, I
that
bottom out at an F sharp.
for that high C, the reason why that was so important to me wasn't because I thought I'd be doing C's all the time, but I wanted to make that B flat, that A, and that G sharp. I wanted to
Yeah.
make that really comfortable and really solid, so that when I was going through during my senior recital, going through some of the Ravel and the Brahms, because
Couple of A's
there's
in there, maybe.
there's at least one, and it's right there at the end of the. Oh, I'm trying. I don't remember the name of the piece, but it's the fourth movement of Die Verernste Gesänge, where. Congratulations, you guys got me to sing on camera, but it's that Nun aber bleibe Glaube, Hoffnung, Liebe diese drei. But that top note is totally optional because there's a
Right.
much easier chromatic slide that you can do with that. But I haven't sung in probably a year. But that I wanted to make sure that no matter like I could be at death's door and still hit that comfortably, which is why I wanted to get that expanded as far as it did. So I know for a fact that like most baritone performance repertoire is like what probably
B
a
to like
B or a B
F sharp
flat, yeah, at
at most.
best.
Usually you're sitting between like a low C. Honestly, usually you're sitting between like a low D and like an E flat or E. E flat or E you'll see a lot. Um I actually been working well, when I've been fucking singing, which hasn't been enough because of it's a little hard to stay motivated sometimes in the current climate for music. But when I have been singing, like that's something that I am trying to really work the kinks out of because I'm very much not a natural singer. Uh, I so I've been trying to get because I can. It's easier to do the Fs, the F sharps, sometimes the G, and the A, and A flat and A natural, and then when I'm in a lesson, usually I can get up to like a B flat. But trying to get those that break, the E and the E flat
Yep.
really solid because that's where a lot of that rep sits. Like the count, which to this day I'm sometimes just amazed that I was able to sing. Uh, it was great. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no,
But
it's my break sits around there too. So one of the things that we worked on when I was, it's funny to me. By the time I got to Dr. Brown at Pacific Lutheran, like my voice was more or less like your voice continues to develop for a while, but the core of it was
sure,
pretty much done. And I feel bad because I can't remember the name of my voice teacher at Azusa, David something, and he was a fantastic teacher. He's one of the few reasons why I stayed at APU as long as I did was because he was so good. But one of the things he worked on with me, and I think he knew it, is that he knew I had that extreme range. It was just a matter of figuring out how one to get me so I can comfortably deal with the break in the voice, and then how to take a lot of the weight that I carried in that
uh-oh.
voice up into your. I mean, I can hear you.
No.
You're frozen on my screen, but I can hear you. Um, so hopefully you start moving again. Um, hang on. This is what the third time this has happened now. But anyway, I'll just talk through this. But he worked very hard at making
Ah,
sure. Oh, there we go. He worked very hard at making sure that once I was getting into some of that higher rep, so we could start exploring more interesting pieces. Because, like, everybody is going to sing in their senior recital or junior recital, what have you. There's going to be at least one of those Blue Book Italian arias. It's just the
mhm.
way it is. And they suck. I hate those arias so much because they're so it's so standard. You hear it all. How Vittoria mio core, Gial Sole del Gange. If I had $1 for every time I heard Gial Sole del Gange, I would have bought my laptop 3 years ago. Like all these, Che Fiero Costume, all these different Italian arias, we've heard them so many times. So then when somebody comes in and does a weird, I don't remember the composer's name, but does a weird piece like Penguin Geometry, or comes in with something as big and ambitious as a junior senior as Die Verernste Gesänge, or comes in with that Ravel cycle that I did, or what have you, tackle some of that really wide range and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot more interesting. It's a lot more fun. So one of the things that we worked on to a very large degree, he knew that like the low end of my voice was fine. That's where my speaking range is for the most part, and I've done a lot of stuff in my low end. So developing the high end in a healthy way just seemed like a natural thing. And the funny thing, the more we worked on that high end, the more comfortable my low end got. Where by the time I was easily, comfortably hitting that G sharp A, getting that low E was, I mean, it was almost an expectation to be able to do. Whenever I got sick, with like a head cold or something like that, I knew that like, okay, when we're well enough to sing again, we're gonna go back into the studio and see just how far we go.
Yeah.
And a low B flat is the lowest it ever got.
I do remember being in vocal ped and they were saying like you probably shouldn't do that when you're sick.
I always did it when I was on the mend. I never did it when I was in like the middle
Sure.
of it.
I remember, I don't know if she was sick, but this was after your time. Like I think it was the year after you left, or maybe the next year. No, I think it was anyway. Doesn't matter. But Lydia Bill, she came in and she was like, "Guys, I did throat singing," and we were like, "What?" And she said, I was singing down, and and she played a recording for us, and she was doing that, Mongolian like deep tone, and it was like we were all like freaking out. We're like, "That's so cool!"
I
Which
always
is,
I always hesitate to say this because it makes it sound like I'm like being creepy. I have always respected and always appreciated, and to an extent sort of feared, Lydia Bill. I have never the this is something that goes past genders. Never met a human being who I have been both equally impressed by and intimidated by in my entire life.
I think
Um,
it's fair,
like there's just
but it's a positive kind of intimidation.
oh yeah, no,
Like
it's
I'm like, if someone comes in here and starts,
I lost you again. Great. Now I know we need to wrap up because this is like the fourth time now that I've lost the boy. This is so weird. Because it says, funny thing, my connection is fine. Um, but yeah, Lydia, if you ever listen to this, know that like if there is a fan club, I don't have the confidence to start it, but know that I'm going to try and be a charter member at some point. I have met few, if any, persons who I've been more impressed by, just in general, in terms of the way you carry yourself, the way you walk into a room, the way you just take command of a situation, and the no bullshit attitude that you have has always impressed me. So just there you go. Do with that what you need to do. I hope that if you do listen to these two idiots, that that it does something for your day, something positive. I like that Brennan is going to get back in, and it'll be probably time for us to sign off because we're at the 2 hour mark almost, and that's usually about when we cut things short. But yeah, so. uh, I'm gonna go ahead. Yep, there he's gone. To go ahead and sign off since we're at the 2 hour mark. This is great live. Oh my gosh. So, yeah. This has been a blast to talk about, blast to hang out, and it's a weird thing I don't get to talk about my education too much. It's just not something that comes up both in my work life and in my personal life because Brennan and I were in school for a year and a half, and in that time we actually, and the years following, we actually um, we've actually talked a lot about that kind of stuff. So, oh, there's the full view. So yeah, it's always a blast to have you guys on. Pop in and listen. If you guys are watching the VOD for this, I know it's been kind of a weird, chaotic thing to kind of listen to and listen to us, live troubleshoot a lot of our issues. Alec is playing Everspace right now. That's really cool. Go away, little notification. There you go. So yeah, this has been a great show. Again, I am one of your hosts, Nathan. You can always find me at Robiwan Kenobi. That's ROBEWONKENOBI91. On Twitter, for Brennan, you can always find him at Bren Bricks, or I believe it's at Brennan Brashew or Brashew. At oh man, at BRENNAN. Oh boy, BRICHOUX. I hope I got that right. So yeah, that's an episode. It's always great hanging out, and remember that Henry's hard sodas is only they're only hard if you leave them in the freezer and they freeze, because liquid by definition is soft. Bye.